Margaret Foster stood in the community center lobby on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, staring at the volunteer sign-up sheet for the annual holiday meal service. At 73, Margaret had been thinking a lot about gratitude lately, what it meant, how to show it, how to live it instead of just feeling it. Her daughter Linda had suggested volunteering this year. "Mom, you've been saying you want to do something meaningful. The community center serves Thanksgiving dinner to homeless folks and anyone who needs a hot meal. Why don't you sign up?" Margaret had hesitated. She'd never done anything like this before. She'd spent most of her adult life focused on her own family, raising her son Michael, caring for her late husband Robert during his long illness, keeping her own household running. Volunteering at a soup kitchen felt outside her comfort zone. But Robert had been gone for 3 years now. Michael was 51, living across the country with his own family. And Margaret's days felt emptier than she wanted to admit. Maybe it was time to look outward instead of inward. She picked up the pen and signed her name under Thursday, Thanksgiving Day Serving Team. On Thanksgiving morning, Margaret arrived at the community center at 9 a.m. The meal would be served from noon to 3, but volunteers were needed early to help with setup and food preparation. The coordinator, a cheerful woman named Sandra, directed Margaret to the serving line. "You'll be here at the turkey station," Sandra explained. "Just put a nice slice or two on each plate, smile, and wish people a happy Thanksgiving. Easy." It sounded simple enough. But as the doors opened at noon, and people began filing through, Margaret felt a flutter of nervousness. She'd never interacted with homeless people before. What would she say? How should she act? The first person in line was an elderly woman with kind eyes and a worn coat. "Happy Thanksgiving," Margaret said, placing turkey on her plate. "Bless you, dear," the woman replied. "This smells wonderful." It was that simple. Margaret relaxed and found her rhythm. Person after person came through the line, families with children, elderly individuals, young people who looked lost, veterans, people of all ages and backgrounds. Each one grateful, each one polite, each one human. About an hour into service, a man shuffled up to Margaret's station. He was probably in his 60s, though the hard life of homelessness made it difficult to tell. He had a long gray beard, wore multiple layers of tattered clothing, and carried a backpack that looked like it held everything he owned. His eyes were downcast, his shoulders hunched. "Happy Thanksgiving," Margaret said warmly, placing turkey on his plate. He looked up briefly, nodded, and mumbled something that might have been "thank you." As he moved down the line, something nagged at Margaret, something familiar about him, though she couldn't place what. She'd never seen him before. She was certain of that. Yet something in his face, his eyes, struck a chord of recognition. She dismissed it as imagination and continued serving. But 20 minutes later, when the man came back through the line for seconds, Margaret felt that recognition again, stronger this time. "Would you like more turkey?" she asked. He nodded, still not quite meeting her eyes. But when he looked up for just a moment, Margaret saw it. Something in his expression, in the shape of his face, that triggered a memory she couldn't quite grasp. "Have we met before?" she asked impulsively. The man froze. For a moment something flickered in his eyes. Surprise? Fear? But then he shook his head quickly and moved away with his plate. Margaret watched him find a seat in the corner, eating alone, his shoulders hunched protectively around his food. Who was he? Why did he seem familiar? After the meal service ended and cleanup was finished, Margaret found herself lingering. Most of the guests had left, but a few remained, including the bearded man in the corner. He was slowly packing his things, preparing to leave. Margaret made a decision. She approached his table. "Excuse me," she said gently. "I know this might sound strange, but I really feel like I know you from somewhere. Are you sure we haven't met?" The man looked up at her, and for the first time made direct eye contact. His eyes were hazel with flecks of gold, unusual, striking eyes. And suddenly, Margaret knew. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, Joseph? Joseph Brennan?" The man's face went pale. He stood up quickly, gathering his backpack. "I should go." "Wait, please wait. It is you, isn't it? Joseph Brennan from St. Luke's Hospital?" The man stopped, his back to her, frozen. Margaret's mind was racing, her heart pounding. You saved my son's life. 23 years ago. You saved Michael's life. Joseph turned around slowly. His eyes were filled with something Margaret couldn't quite name. Shame, perhaps, or sorrow. Mrs. Foster, he said quietly, I didn't realize it was you. You remember me? I remember Michael. The accident. How could I forget? They stood in the emptying community center. Two people connected by a moment, 23 years ago, that had changed both their lives. Can we sit? Margaret asked. Please, just for a few minutes? Joseph hesitated, then nodded. They sat at the table where he'd been eating. Margaret's hands were shaking. I can't believe it's you. All these years I've wanted to thank you properly. To tell you what you did meant everything. And now here you are. Here I am, Joseph said, his voice rough. Not exactly the reunion you probably imagined. Margaret looked at him, really looked. The expensive suit and confident bearing she remembered from the hospital had been replaced by layers of worn clothing and the unmistakable signs of homelessness. But the eyes were the same, those unusual hazel eyes. What happened? She asked gently. Last I knew, you were a respected surgeon at St. Luke's. One of the best, they told me. Joseph's face tightened. That was a long time ago. Will you tell me, please? For a long moment, Joseph was silent. Then, slowly, he began to speak. You remember I operated on your son, the car accident. His internal injuries were extensive. I was the trauma surgeon on call that night. I remember, Margaret said. You worked on him for 7 hours. When you came out to the waiting room, you looked exhausted. But you told me he was going to make it. You saved him. Joseph nodded. He was lucky. We got him in time. Another 20 minutes and... He didn't finish the sentence. You were brilliant, Margaret said. Everyone said so. The nurses, the other doctors. They said you were one of the best trauma surgeons they'd ever worked with. I was good at my job, Joseph said simply. I loved it. Being a surgeon was all I ever wanted to be. So what happened? Joseph took a breath. 2 years after your son's accident, I was operating on a patient. A young woman, car accident, similar injuries to Michael's. I'd been on call for 36 hours. I was exhausted, but I was the senior surgeon on duty. I couldn't leave her to a resident. Margaret felt dread building in her chest. I made a mistake, Joseph continued, his voice flat. A small one. I clamped the wrong vessel during the surgery. Just for a moment, but a moment was enough. She had complications. Started bleeding internally. We tried to fix it. But, he stopped, his hands clenching. She didn't make it. 23 years old. Someone's daughter. And she died because I was too tired, too arrogant to admit I shouldn't have been operating. Oh, Joseph. There was an investigation. Technically, I'd followed all the rules about how long surgeons could work. But the patient's family sued. The hospital settled. And He paused. I couldn't forgive myself. I'd spent my whole life saving people, and I'd killed someone through my own negligence. Margaret reached across the table, but Joseph pulled his hands back. I started drinking, he continued, to forget, to sleep, to numb the guilt. It got worse. I tried to keep working, but my hands weren't steady anymore. My judgment was compromised. The hospital put me on leave. Mandatory rehab. I went, but I couldn't stay sober. The guilt was too heavy. What about your family? I had a wife, Sarah. She tried to help, but I pushed her away, told her to leave me, that I wasn't worth saving. Eventually she did. I lost my medical license, lost my home, lost everything, and I told myself I deserved it, that this was my penance for what I'd done. Margaret's eyes were filled with tears. Joseph, you made one mistake. One terrible mistake, but one mistake. You saved so many people. You saved my son. One life saved doesn't erase one life lost. No, but it matters. It counts. You saved Michael. He's 51 now. He has a wife, 2 children. They exist because you saved him. That 14-year-old boy you operated on 23 years ago has lived an entire life because of your skill and dedication. Joseph's eyes were wet. I'm glad. I've thought about him over the years, wondered if he was okay. He's more than okay. He's wonderful, and he's alive because of you. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Margaret asked, How long have you been homeless? 15 years, give or take. I lost track after a while. And you've been living on the streets all that time? Shelters sometimes. Streets when there's no room or when I can't face being around people. I've gotten used to it. No one gets used to being homeless, Joseph. Where were you planning to go today? After the meal? He shrugged. There's a spot under the highway overpass where some of us camp. It's not too bad if the weather holds. Margaret made a decision. No, you're not going there. Not tonight. You're coming home with me. Joseph's eyes widened. Mrs. Foster, I can't. Yes, you can. It's Thanksgiving. You saved my son's life. You're not spending tonight under a highway overpass. I'm a stranger now. You don't know me anymore. You're not a stranger. You're the man who gave me my son back. And you need help. I'm offering it. Why would you want someone like me in your home? Because 23 years ago, you didn't give up on a dying 14-year-old boy even after 7 hours of surgery. Because you deserve the same chance you gave him. And because it's the right thing to do. Joseph looked at her with those hazel eyes, and for the first time since she'd recognized him, Margaret saw hope flickering there. I don't have anything to offer you, he said quietly. I can't repay you. I'm not asking you to repay me. I'm asking you to let me help, just for tonight. Just for Thanksgiving. Will you do that? After a long moment, Joseph nodded. Margaret drove him to her small house on the outskirts of town. Joseph was quiet during the drive, looking out the window at the suburban streets he'd once belonged to and been exiled from. I have a guest room, Margaret said as they pulled into her driveway. There's a bathroom with a shower, clean towels. I think I might have some of Robert's old clothes that would fit you. Inside, Margaret showed Joseph to the guest room. Take your time, shower, rest, whatever you need. I'll make some tea. Joseph stood in the doorway of the guest room, looking overwhelmed. Mrs. Foster. Margaret, please call me Margaret. Margaret. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, just be here, that's enough. An hour later, Joseph emerged from the guest room transformed. He'd showered, shaved his long beard, and was wearing Robert's old flannel shirt and jeans. Without the layers of street grime and the heavy beard, he looked more like the surgeon Margaret remembered. Older, weathered, but recognizable. They sat in Margaret's living room with tea. On the mantel were photos of Michael, his high school graduation, his wedding, his children. That's him? Joseph asked, looking at the photos. That's Michael. He's a teacher now. High school English. He lives in Oregon with his wife and 2 kids. A teacher. That's wonderful. He's never forgotten what you did for him. Every year on the anniversary of the accident, he says a prayer of thanks for the surgeon who saved his life. Joseph's voice cracked. I don't deserve that. Yes, you do. Joseph, you made a terrible mistake. But you've been punishing yourself for 21 years. Don't you think that's enough? The girl I killed doesn't get to stop being dead after 21 years. No, she doesn't. But she wouldn't want you to throw away your entire life either. No one would want that. They talked for hours. Joseph told her about the descent, the drinking, the loss of his license, his wife leaving, the foreclosure on his house, the years of homelessness, the shame that kept him from reaching out to anyone who'd known him before, the conviction that he deserved to suffer. Margaret told him about Robert's death, about the loneliness of widowhood, about her own struggles to find meaning and purpose, about how volunteering today had been her attempt to look outward instead of dwelling in her own grief. Finding you here, Margaret said, it doesn't feel like coincidence. What does it feel like? Like grace, like a chance to repay an old debt, like maybe both of us needed this. As evening fell, Margaret made a simple dinner, leftover turkey from the community center meal, mashed potatoes, green beans. They ate together at her kitchen table, a homeless former surgeon and a widow, connected by a moment of crisis 23 years ago. After dinner, Margaret said, I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer. Joseph nodded. What if you didn't go back to the streets? What if you stayed here, in my guest room, until we can figure out a better plan? Margaret, I can't impose. It's not imposing. This house has been empty except for me for 3 years. The guest room hasn't been used since Michael visited last Christmas. And honestly, I could use the company. The silence gets heavy sometimes. I don't have anything to contribute. No money, no job. You have your presence, your story, your experience. That's not nothing. Joseph was quiet for a long time. Finally he said, I'm scared. Of what? Of hoping. Of trying to build something and failing again. Of being a burden. Of disappointing you. You already saved my son's life. You couldn't possibly disappoint me. What if I start drinking again? What if I can't handle being around people after so many years alone? Then we'll deal with it. Together. But Joseph, you can't spend the rest of your life punishing yourself. At some point you have to forgive yourself for being human. For making one terrible mistake in a career full of lives saved. Tears rolled down Joseph's face. I don't know if I can. Then let me help you try, please. Let me give you the same chance you gave Michael. A chance to live? Joseph looked at Margaret, this woman he'd met once 23 years ago in a hospital waiting room, who just offered him something he hadn't had in 15 years. Hope. Okay, he whispered. Okay, I'll stay, at least for a little while. Margaret smiled, feeling something warm expand in her chest. Good, that's good. That night, Joseph slept in a real bed for the first time in years. Margaret lay in her own bed, thinking about the strange paths life takes. This morning, she'd gone to serve Thanksgiving dinner to strangers. Tonight, she had a house guest who was both a stranger and the man who'd saved her son's life. Linda called the next morning. Mom, how was volunteering? Did you enjoy it? Margaret looked through the doorway at Joseph, who was sitting at her kitchen table with coffee, looking uncertain but present. I did, Margaret said. And Linda? Something incredible happened. I found someone from a long time ago, someone who needs help. What do you mean? I'll explain later. But honey, I think maybe this is what I've been looking for, a way to give back, a way to make a difference. I'm glad, Mom. You sound happier than you have in a long time. After hanging up, Margaret sat down across from Joseph. So here's what I'm thinking. We start small. Today, we go to the clinic and get you checked out medically. Make sure you're okay. Then we look into what services are available. Mental health support, substance abuse counseling if you need it, job training. Margaret, I was a surgeon. I can't go back to that. No, probably not. But you can do something. You have skills, experience, knowledge. We'll figure it out together. Why are you doing this? Margaret thought about her answer. Because 23 years ago, you didn't give up on my son when it would have been easier to let him go. Because you deserve the same refusal to give up. Because I have space in my home and my life, and you need both. And honestly, because I think we're supposed to help each other. I think that's the whole point. Over the following weeks, Margaret and Joseph fell into a routine. She drove him to appointments, medical checkups, counseling sessions, meetings with a social worker. She helped him apply for his Social Security benefits that he'd never claimed. She connected him with a program for professionals in recovery. Joseph helped around the house, fixing things, cooking meals, maintaining the yard. Small contributions, but they gave him purpose. Linda came to visit and meet Joseph. She was skeptical at first, protective of her mother, wary of this stranger living in her childhood home. But when Joseph told her the story of saving Michael, when she saw how her mother came alive with purpose again, her resistance softened. You saved my brother, Linda said to Joseph. Thank you for that. And thank you for letting my mom help you. She's needed this. I'm the one being helped, Joseph protested. No, Linda said gently. You're both helping each other. That's how it works. Margaret called Michael and told him the whole story. Michael was silent for a long moment, then said, Mom, please tell Dr. Brennan that I think about him every day. That I named my son after him, Joseph Michael Foster. That I've always wanted to find him and thank him. And that I'm so glad you found each other again. When Margaret relayed this to Joseph, he wept. He named his son after me? His middle name is Joseph, after the man who gave him his life back. I don't deserve that. You do. You saved a boy who grew up to be an incredible man who's raising incredible children. That's your legacy, Joseph. Not one mistake, a lifetime of good work, and one boy who lived because of you. 3 months after Thanksgiving, Joseph was doing better. He'd been sober the entire time, attending AA meetings regularly. His physical health had improved with regular meals and medical care. And slowly, Carefully, he was beginning to forgive himself. He found part-time work at the community center where they'd first reconnected, helping in the kitchen, assisting with programs. It wasn't surgery, but it was meaningful. One evening in February, Joseph and Margaret were having dinner when he said, "I want to tell you something." "Okay." "I've been thinking about that girl, the one who died. Her name was Emily Chen. I've carried her name with me for 21 years, but I've never done anything to honor her memory except destroy my own life." "What are you thinking?" "I want to do something meaningful. Maybe volunteer with the hospital's patient advocacy program. Or mentor young medical students about the dangers of overwork and fatigue. Something that could prevent another Emily." Margaret smiled. "I think that's beautiful. Her family probably hates me. Maybe, or maybe, like you, they just want her death to mean something. Want something good to come from it." Joseph contacted the hospital's patient safety committee. He told them his story, the mistake, the consequences, the years of homelessness and addiction, and his recent recovery. He offered to speak to medical students and residents about the importance of self-care, about knowing when you're too tired to work safely, about the devastating consequences of one moment's error. The committee was moved by his honesty and vulnerability. They created a program, the Emily Chen Patient Safety Initiative, with Joseph as a regular speaker. The first time Joseph spoke to a group of medical students, he was terrified. But as he told his story, both of the lives he'd saved and the life he'd lost, something shifted in him. The shame began to transform into purpose. "I can't bring Emily Chen back," he told the students, "but I can try to prevent her story from happening to someone else. If one of you, someday, makes the decision to sleep instead of operating when you're exhausted, if one of you asks for help instead of pushing through, if one patient lives because you learned from my mistake, then Emily's death will have meaning beyond tragedy." The students listened, rapt. Many approached him afterward, with questions, with thanks, with their own fears about making mistakes. One year after Thanksgiving, Margaret and Joseph stood together at the community center, volunteering again for the holiday meal. Joseph was serving turkey this time, in Margaret's spot from the previous year. "Full circle," Margaret said, smiling at him. "Full circle," Joseph agreed. He looked different now. Clean, healthy, purposeful. Still living in Margaret's guest room, but working, contributing, healing. A young woman approached with her plate. Joseph placed turkey on it and said, "Happy Thanksgiving." "Thank you," she said. "I'm grateful for this meal. I don't have family nearby, and this place makes me feel less alone." "I know exactly what you mean," Joseph said gently. "I'm grateful you're here." After she moved on, Margaret touched Joseph's arm. "How are you doing? Really?" "I'm good," Joseph said, and meant it. "A year ago today, I was living under a highway overpass, convinced I deserved to suffer forever. And then, you recognized me. You saw past the homeless man to the person I used to be, and more importantly, to the person I could still become." "You did the hard work," Margaret said. "I just offered a guest room." "You offered hope. That's bigger than a guest room." That evening, back at Margaret's house, Linda arrived with her family. Michael called from Oregon, and Margaret put him on speakerphone. "Dr. Brennan?" Michael's voice came through. "It's Michael Foster, the kid you saved 23 years ago." Joseph's eyes filled. "Michael, it's good to hear your voice. I've wanted to thank you for so long, for saving my life, for giving me all these years, my education, my career, my family. Every good thing in my life exists because you didn't give up on a dying 14-year-old. I'm so proud of you," Joseph said, "what you've become, the life you've built. I'm proud of you too. Mom told me about your recovery, about the speaking you're doing for patient safety. You're still saving lives, Dr. Brennan, just in a different way." After the call, Joseph sat quietly in Margaret's living room, surrounded by photos of the family he'd saved, in the home of the woman who'd saved him. "I've been thinking," Joseph said, "about gratitude, about what it really means." "What does it mean?" Margaret asked. "I think it means seeing the chances we're given, the moments that could go either way. 23 years ago, I saved Michael. I easily could have lost him. Another few minutes, a slightly different injury, a small mistake, but I saved him, and he got to live. Yes. And a year ago you recognized me in a soup kitchen. You could have pretended you didn't know me, could have been afraid of me or disgusted by what I'd become. But instead, you offered help. You saved me. We saved each other, Margaret said. I was drowning in loneliness and lack of purpose. You gave me something to do, someone to care about, someone who needed me. We're quite a pair, Joseph said, smiling. A homeless former surgeon and a lonely widow, brought together by Thanksgiving, and a 14-year-old boy from 23 years ago. The universe has a strange sense of humor, Margaret agreed. Or maybe it has a strange sense of justice. I spent 21 years punishing myself for one mistake. And then I was given a gift, the chance to be in the right place, at the right time to be saved by someone whose life I'd changed. That feels like grace. It is grace, Margaret said. It's all grace. The lives we save, the lives that save us, the second chances we get, and the ones we give. All of it. They sat together in the warm living room, two people who'd found each other when both were lost, who'd saved each other in ways neither had expected. Outside, the November air was cold, but inside, in Margaret Foster's home, there was warmth and purpose, and the quiet miracle of two lives intersecting at exactly the right moment. Joseph Brennan had been homeless for 15 years, convinced he deserved to suffer forever for one terrible mistake. Margaret Foster had been lonely for 3 years, searching for meaning and purpose in the empty spaces of widowhood. And on Thanksgiving Day, in a community center serving meals to strangers, they'd found each other. The man who'd saved her son, the woman who'd saved him. Both had been homeless in their own ways. Joseph literally, Margaret emotionally. Both had been drowning. Both had been given a lifeline when they needed it most. And both had learned that sometimes angels appear in unexpected forms, in unexpected places, asking for nothing more than turkey on Thanksgiving Day.